Where are you watching from? Chicago? Dallas? Or maybe from the kitchen sink you still believe is safe? I'm not asking for fun. For the past 6 years, my job has been to make sure that Sync never betrays you. Drop your city in the comments so I know. The map of people who once trusted, were overlooked, and still chose to do what's right. I'm Sloane Carter, 39, 6 years at HarborPure Utilities, where the glass of water you drank this morning might have started with my signature. But apparently, 6 years still wasn't enough for them to see I'd been doing a manager's job long before they were willing to pay me like one. The morning light barely reached the 14th floor. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed above a scratched oak table. Graham Whitlock, the CEO, slid a folder across, his voice smooth as porcelain. "We'll revisit your promotion next quarter." Next to him sat Avery Whitlock, 26, his niece and the newly appointed director. The kind of confident head tilt only people who've never failed can pull off. I glanced at the HarborPure logo printed on my paper coffee cup. A single raindrop slid down the rim, hit the table, and spread into a pale brown stain. In that murky reflection, my face looked warped, as if justice itself was being diluted. "I know you've been patient," Graham said, "but leadership transitions are all about timing." Timing. The favorite word of people who never intend to keep their promises. Avery folded her arms, trying to look empathetic. "Sloane, we all admire your dedication, and everyone knows you're the heart of the compliance team. But this year, the company's leaning toward a younger leadership style." I almost laughed. Younger. I wasn't sure if she meant in age or in depth. I turned the cup slightly, hearing the paper scrape the table. That cup was from my first Employee Appreciation Day. 6 years later, they still hadn't replaced it. Maybe they figured if I hadn't left, nothing needed changing. Graham continued, reading from what felt like the same old script. "You're indispensable, Sloane, but Q4 might not be the best time for internal promotions. Let's revisit this in spring, the 10th time." I could have spoken in sync with him, even knew the pause he always took between indispensable and but. He called it spring. I thought of the Canton Bridge leak. They kept saying they'd fix it after the dry season. 6 years later, the water still leaked. I nodded. No arguments, no reactions. Graham hesitated, probably expecting me to ask, "What can I improve?" But I stayed quiet. Avery gave a nervous smile. "I know you're disappointed, but trust me, this isn't personal." I looked at her and said softly, "Your cousin thinks so too?" The air thickened like sludge in an old pipe. Graham cleared his throat. Avery's face flushed red, then he forced another smile. I stood, picked up my cup, and said quietly, "Thanks. I just need some real air." The hallway stretched long and empty, the smell of disinfectant clinging to the walls. I walked slowly, the coffee cup trembling with each step. Outside the glass, the Baltimore harbor lay wrapped in gray fog after the rain. I wondered, if I dropped this cup now, would it sink faster than all those broken promises? My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Don't forget to pick up my meds. And drink filtered water, not from the tap." I saw something about contamination. I laughed. My mom always believed the news and believed I worked at a place that kept its word. Back at my desk, between stacks of old reports, the window was still fogged. The top file read LCRR, Lead and Copper Rule Revisions. I knew every line by heart. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked, like it was asking, "You sure about this?" I typed the file name, LSAR Archive, S. Carter. Pressed enter. A blank document appeared. Empty. But ready. Somewhere down the hall, laughter spilled from the conference room. A celebration, no doubt. The kind of laughter that sounds too young to have learned silence. I set my cup down and watched the last trace of coffee spread. Dull, opaque, reflecting nothing. Then I typed the first line. Monday after the 10th rejection. Project. LCR Archive. The backup of truth. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the window. The sky was still gray, the water is still murky, and for the first time I felt completely calm. I didn't beg, I didn't explain, I didn't ask for more time. Because this time I wasn't looking for approval, I was looking for freedom. If anyone's ever told you it's not the right time while promoting someone less qualified, tell me where you're listening from. because sometimes silence is the answer, and sometimes it's the one they fear the most. Baltimore isn't gentle when it's angry. That year's nor'easter came like the Atlantic had decided to reclaim what humanity had borrowed. That night, the entire Back River plant went dark. Everyone left before 8. Everyone except me. The wind and the sting of chlorine was sharp enough to burn the inside of my nose. The main chlorine valve jammed. If the pressure passed the threshold, more than 2,000 residents would have to evacuate in the middle of a storm. I gripped the handle, turned it barehanded. My nails tore, blood mixing with the cold metal, but the system slowly stabilized. By 6 in the morning, the water in the tank was still. I looked out the window. The clouds were still gray as ash. My phone buzzed with a new email. "Great work, team. We made it through another storm." I laughed. Team. The whole night, it was just me and the wind. But come morning, they still managed to find a we. 2 years later, the PFAS testing project hit a sensor fault. The data was corrupted, results were cross-contaminated. I stayed for 2 days straight, 48 hours without sleep, restoring and hand recording every sample. 3 days later, another email lit up my inbox. "Thanks for stepping in. True team effort." Twice, the same line. That's when I began to understand that at HarborPure, the ones who talked about the work always climbed faster than the ones who actually did it. 6 years. Every review cycle, they pushed the goalpost just a little farther away. Lacking community experience. So I held public meetings, taught residents how to test lead levels. One woman cried when her home's water finally passed inspection. Lacking certification. I took night classes, earned my water system operator license. Lacking leadership. I led storm response crews, managed 4 federal compliance projects. And just when I thought I'd done enough, Graham sent the same message. "Good initiative. Let's talk next cycle. Next cycle. A perfect circle of delay." In one meeting, I asked directly, "You've said I'm close to a promotion for years. Is there a rule I don't understand?" Graham leaned back, his tone soft as the sediment at the bottom of a tank. "Sloane, leadership isn't just about skill. It's about making people feel comfortable." I said nothing. Comfortable. The words stayed in my head like a film of oil on water, shiny, but slippery. Maybe I wasn't comfortable enough to let people forget that I told the truth. I got home late. My mother was sitting in her chair, knitting half a scarf. She'd begun to forget things, but when I opened the door, she still recognized me with her usual question. "You still keeping the water clean, honey?" I nodded. "Still clean, Mom." The only lie I ever allowed myself. One afternoon, my daughter Ellie came out of the bath coughing hard. The doctor said chlorine irritation. But I knew better. I knew exactly which treatment zone our water came from, and that it hadn't been retested since the storm. Ellie looked up, her voice raspy. "Mom, is our water dirty?" I froze, said nothing. My job was to protect people, yet I hadn't protected my own child. That night, I sat in front of the mirror, my hair still smelling faintly of chlorine. The light caught the pale skin and the dark rings under my eyes, like stains that wouldn't wash off. My phone lit up. Leadership evaluation, postponed to next quarter. I laughed. A dry sound, hollow as an empty pipe. After that night, I started writing everything down. Every meeting, every email, every promise. I built a separate Excel file, not on the company system. Dates, times, content, who said what, and what came of it. After a year, there were 128 rows. Each one ended with a single word, pending. Then I tried vanishing for real. Took 2 days off without notice. No one asked. The projects ran fine because I'd taught them how to use the system, how to sign off in my place, how to operate without me. I'd built every process to prove my value, and that's exactly what convinced them I was replaceable. One morning, Caleb from communications walked past my desk, smirking. "Ms. Carter, I heard you're the one actually running this plant." I asked, "From who?" He shrugged. "From someone scared to pay you what you're worth." I laughed. "You're the most honest man in this company," he grinned. "People like you are the foundation others climb on, But if you ever step off, this whole place will collapse." I didn't reply, but his words stayed with me. In the days that followed, I worked more slowly, not from exhaustion, but observation. I noticed how Graham said excellent whenever he planned to cut a budget, how Avery smiled while presenting my idea with her name on it instead of mine, how the men in the department said we when a project succeeded and you when something failed. I used to think justice only needed evidence. Now I know it takes patience and a perfect memory. Friday night, I walked along the harbor bridge. The air smelled of salt and metal. Under the streetlights, the water shimmered, beautiful in a way that wasn't honest. I remembered my first training session on the job. Your duty is to keep the water clear, even when others try to make it murky. I had done exactly that for 6 years. Every time they moved the goalpost, I stayed in line. Every time they said team effort, I worked till morning. But that night, staring down at the current sliding beneath the bridge, I finally understood the one truth I'd never dared to admit. I'd spent 6 years protecting the city's water. No one had ever protected me. A strange calm spread through me. Not anger, not fear, just absolute clarity. Like when the sediment settles and you see the bottom of the tank for the first time. I smiled faintly. I understood the game now, and it was time to set my own rules. If you've ever done everything right, only for them to move the goalpost every time you got close, comment, I understand. Because the moment you realize their rules were never fair, that's when you finally start writing your own. I started one April morning when the sky was the color of dirty rainwater. The office was silent. The printer hummed softly, blue light flickering across my keyboard. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, LCRR Archive, personal copy. Inside it, I began backing up everything I had ever touched, every form, every report, every line of data on lead, chlorine, and PFAS. At the bottom of each file, I added a small line, authored by S. Carter. When I hit save, the click sounded sharp and final, like a metal latch snapping shut. After 6 years in this system, I finally knew where to begin, with evidence. According to the Safe Drinking Water Act and the lead and copper rule revisions, every public water system must submit abnormal test data to the Maryland Department of the Environment within 30 days of detection. I knew those clauses like my mother's lullabies. They didn't. The ones a few pay grades above me preferred to ignore them. "No rush, Sloane," Graham said, his voice always lowering when he wanted to manipulate. "Let's send it next week. We need to coordinate the message first." I looked straight at him. "If the sample's contaminated, I have 30 days to tell the truth. You're asking for 31. He smiled. The kind of smile people use when they cover guilt with charm. "Don't be so rigid. This is politics, not a lab." I wrote that down. Politics. The word people use when they bend the truth and forget to feel ashamed. That afternoon, I bought a waterproof external hard drive, bright orange, impossible to miss. Even if it fell into the bay, I thought, it would probably swim back. I labeled it Personal Backup, 2018-2024. I began transferring files, data sheets, reports, charts. Everything is neat, cold, and precise. Inside every PDF, my name sat right below the official code. Certified Operator, number 2481. If anyone ever tried to erase me, they'd have to rewrite history. Avery, my direct supervisor, passed by, holding her coffee like she was auditioning for Busy Executive of the Year. "Still archiving old stuff?" she asked. "We're moving to the new platform soon," I answered without looking up. "I just like keeping history, in case the new platform forgets the past." Avery laughed, thinking I was joking. I laughed too, except I knew I wasn't. I copied files slowly, listening to the fan whir. Lines of data slid across the screen like small silver fish, quiet, obedient, and alive. I was saving my life's work from the people who didn't understand it. That night, I brought the drive home. Ellie saw me label it and asked, "Mom, what's that?" "A box to keep important things safe. Like a diary?" "Yes. But in this one, no one can tear the pages out." For the next few weeks, I lived like someone building a bunker. Still showed up, still smiled. But in my head, everything was sorted and cataloged. I made another backup in the cloud, one more hidden in a photo folder. When it was done, the clock read 2 in pause. The morning. Everything was encrypted, locked. I whispered to myself, I can back up faster than they promote their relatives. For the first time in months, I laughed. For real. 3 days later, Graham called me in. Sloane, before we submit the February report, I'd like to adjust a few numbers for consistency with last year. Adjust what? Just rounding. Off by a few thousandths, nothing major. I leaned back. If it's nothing major, why don't you sign it yourself? He froze. I don't have the license. Right, I said evenly. Because that signature carries criminal liability, not political weight. I saw it. His smile faltered for half a second before he pulled it back on. From that day, I knew I was walking on ice. I didn't plan to fight, I just wanted to be standing in the right place when it broke. I called this stage Phase Orange. The color of warning, the color of the box is sitting quietly in my drawer at home. A week later, Avery showed up, pale-faced. Ms. Carter, MDE, just emailed a reminder for the Q1 PIFS report. Graham says you're preparing it. I already sent it. He said he hasn't received it. I sent it directly to MDE with a signed, certified copy. They confirmed through the system. He doesn't need to receive it. Avery said nothing. I saw her blink fast, the reflex of someone realizing their authority was only borrowed. The next day, Graham summoned me. You're not authorized to send data independently. That's overstepping. I followed the state protocol. Sloane, you're putting me in a difficult position. I know. But contaminated water puts people in worse health. For the first time, he had no answer. That night, I opened the orange box and checked every copy. The lamp reflected off its surface, bright as fire. I added one new text file, short and simple. If anyone asks, tell them I don't keep secrets. I keep evidence. When I hit save, the soft click filled the room. Harmless, but it made my heart pound. The next morning, I brewed tea and opened the window. The harbor wind carried the smell of salt and steel. I didn't know when that box would matter, next month, next year, but I knew when it did, everything inside would be enough to make the truth rise to the surface. I touched the orange rubber shell, cool and solid, the only thing in this house that didn't pretend. It sat quietly, loyal, ready to record every fall others pretended not to see. My job had always been to keep the water clear. Now I was keeping the truth from turning murky. I don't keep secrets. I keep evidence. It rained in Baltimore for 3 straight days. The sky seemed to pour down everything the city had tried to hide. Sewers overflowed, streets flooded, and the Back River treatment plant screamed like a sleepless body. I knew what heavy rain meant. Old pipes leaching metal and every lead reading ready to spike within hours. By Wednesday morning, I had opened the latest report. Canton, dense housing, narrow row homes, had a sample above the LCR action level, 0.020 milligigs ln L, double the limit. That wasn't a statistical deviation. That was poison. I printed 3 copies and placed them on the table. By noon, Graham sent an email. Emergency meeting, 2 p.m. 4 people, 1 glass room. Rain hits the windows like someone knocking from the other side of the truth. Graham started first. Let's not overreact. We'll wait until Q4. We need more confirmatory data. Avery added, right, no need to alarm residents yet. We can label it routine testing. Caleb, the comms rep, chimed in. I can make an infographic, maybe something like, Baltimore water remains within national safety standards. 1 slide, quick fix. I stared at them, 3 people discussing contamination like they were choosing fonts for a brochure. I pushed the printed report toward them. Try filtering out lead with an infographic, I said, my voice as steady as dripping water. The room fell silent. Caleb cleared his throat. I'm just doing my job. So am I replied. That afternoon, I got a call from the school. Ellie had an asthma attack. She was in the ER at Mercy Hospital. I ran through the rain, drenched like I'd swum through the Canton storm itself. The doctor, young and kind-faced, spoke carefully. Ms. Carter, Your daughter's showing signs of respiratory inflammation. It could be environmental, maybe elevated chlorine or metals in the water. I recommend switching water sources for now. Switching water. I keep the city's water clean, yet my daughter has to avoid it just to breathe. Ellie squeezed my hand, her voice faint. Mom, the water at school smells weird too. My head hurts. I held her hand tighter, didn't cry, just tasted that sharp metallic sting rising in my throat, the taste of truth. That night, I went back to the office. Only the rain kept me company, pounding the tin roof. I opened the lead action level exceedance report, the one Graham avoided like it carried a death sentence. Line by line, I filled it out carefully. Sample IDs, locations, dates, technician signatures. Every field is complete. Every detail is exact. At the bottom, there was one final box. Responsible, certified, operator. I signed it. S. Carter, certified operator, number 2481. The pen slid, ink spreading into a tiny dark stain that wouldn't wash out. I stopped and looked at my reflection in the glass. My face blended with the fluorescent light, thin, sharp, and clearer than ever. I thought of Ellie, of Graham's voice, of all those meetings where deceit was rebranded as professional delay. They called it leadership. I called it lead, heavy metal. The more it builds up, the harder it is to flush out. I pressed send. The report went straight to the Maryland Department of the Environment. Outside, the rain sounded longer somehow. In my sent folder, one simple line appeared. Delivered. No confetti, no applause, no corporate thank you. Just a soft ping, the truest sound I'd heard in 6 years. The next morning, Graham walked into my office, rain still dripping off his coat. You sent the report? Yes. Without my approval? I don't need approval to follow the law. He narrowed his eyes. Do you realize the consequences of this? I do, I said. I'm just not sure you realize the consequences of not doing it. He froze. For the first time, I saw him unsure, caught between threat and plea. He exhaled. You've put us in a dangerous position. I tilted my head slightly. No. I just opened a window in a room that was suffocating. That afternoon, Avery stopped by. Her voice was smaller than usual. Graham's trying to redo the report. Says you entered the wrong data. I have the original lab logs, technician signatures, timestamps, and chain of custody forms. I just thought you should know they're rewriting the story. I smiled. Let's see what they write with, water or ink. Avery looked at me for a long moment, her eyes a mix of fear and respect. I don't think they understand what you're doing. I don't think they understand what clean water means, I said. That night, I got home late again. Mom was asleep, her half-knitted scarf slipping from her hands. Ellie lay in the hospital bed, breathing through light oxygen. I sat beside her, listening to the heart monitor tick like rain on a roof. I remembered a line from an old training manual. Lead has no color, no taste, no smell. But it always leaves a trace. Lead is invisible, like lies. And I'd lived among enough dirty promises to know the truth might taste metallic, but it's less toxic than deceit. Monday morning, the internal bulletin said nothing about Canton. No emails, no meetings. No one looked me in the eye in the hallway. Their silence was thick as sediment at the bottom of a tank. I kept working, opening files, editing data, signing reports. Only one thing had changed. I was done staying quiet. One email had left the system carrying a real signature, a real license, and a real conscience. I sent. They stayed silent, and the city drank the truth. Monday morning, the sky over Baltimore was suspiciously clear. That kind of clarity that doesn't feel real, like the harbor's surface after a storm. I got to the office early, holding a white envelope. Just 7 lines. No explanation, no thanks. To the Executive Board of HarborPure Utilities, I, Sloane Carter, certified, operator number 2481, hereby resign, effective immediately. I placed it on Graham's desk, right beside his still steaming coffee cup. When he walked in, shoes still wet, he froze for half a second. Read fast. Looked up. "You're joking." "I'm not. We're in the middle of a reporting quarter." "I know. You can't just walk out like this." "I just did." Avery rushed in, hair damp, breathing hard. "Ms. Carter, you can't abandon your post. This is a breach of duty." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm following the procedure. I just stopped asking permission from the people who abused it." Caleb poked his head through the door, looking like someone who'd walked into the wrong scene of a movie. "What's happening?" "I quit," I said. "For real?" "As real as it gets." Graham steadied his tone, trying to regain control. "You'll need to hand over all company materials. Project files, test data, reports, all of it is company property." I tilted my head, voice calm. "Happy to. My consulting rate is $275 an hour." Caleb gave a dry laugh. "You're kidding, right?" "Not yet, but I can throw in a slide deck if you'd like." Avery's eyes widened. "Are you extorting us?" "I'm reevaluating my market value." They looked at me as if they were seeing a real person for the first time in a room built entirely of pretense. I didn't say another word, just reached into my bag, pulled out the orange USB, the final backup of the operating system, and set it gently on the desk. "This is the part that belongs to the company. The rest, they'll have to rebuild." By 11, internal emails began to spiral. "Urgent. Staff update. Spread through the building like a virus." By noon, everyone knew I was gone. A young technician texted me, "You did the right thing. I wish I had your courage." I read it. Didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the highest form of encouragement. 2 days later, what I expected arrived. The press. Front page of the Baltimore Sun. Engineer reports lead exceedance. Whistleblower or hero. They ran a photo taken from behind. My faded HarborPure jacket, glistening with rain. The article was part technical, part praise, part suspicion. Balanced just enough to celebrate, caution, and sell. A reporter called, voice smooth and professional. "Ms. Carter, do you have any comment on being called a whistleblower?" I paused, then said, "Water should be clearer than promises." Silence. Then a soft click as the recorder stopped. Inside HarborPure, things began to crack. Graham formed a crisis team. Avery was forced to rewrite the reports, but the system required my authentication code. Caleb worked on slides to reaffirm public trust. At 3 in the morning, I received a forwarded email from a colleague. "Graham's trying to rebuild the data. They're panicking." I read it. Didn't laugh. Didn't gloat. I just felt calm. Calm like the harbor after the storm, when the waves retreat and leave behind everything the city tried to hide. On the third day, I got a call I never expected. "Avery." Her voice was hoarse, tired. "They want me to sign your name on the new report," she said quickly. I didn't. "Good." "They said they'll fire me." "Are you scared?" A pause. "No, but I hate feeling like you used to," I exhaled. "Then don't let them turn you into who I was 6 years ago." "Do you regret it?" "Me? No. I just regret believing them for that long." That afternoon, the local news aired a special bulletin. "State investigates HarborPure after lead report." Live footage, MDE officers entering headquarters with sealed evidence bags. On Graham's desk, today's newspaper with my name in bold. I imagined him seeing it. The same 3 words he'd used for 6 years, only when he needed my signature. Now they were the headline. I sat in a cafe at Fells Point, watching the harbor. The sky is still dull, but dry. Caleb appeared on the evening news, repeating the company line. HarborPure remains committed to transparency and full cooperation. I smiled slightly. That sentence sounded just like the fresh coat of paint they used on corroded pipes. Shiny, but useless against leaks. A man at the next table glanced at the TV, then at me. "You believe them?" I answered without looking up. I know them. That night, I drove home late. The air carried the chill of early autumn. My phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom, I picked up. Her voice trembled. Sweetheart, I just saw you on TV. They said you went against the company. Are you all right? I stayed quiet a moment, looking out the window at the city lights mirrored in the harbor, glittering, still, listening. I'm fine, Mom. The water will be clean again. I'm proud of you, she whispered, but don't let them hurt you. Hurt only comes when we stay silent, Mom. I sat there listening as the first drops of rain returned after 3 dry days. This rain felt different, lighter, cleaner, like it was washing something away. I set the phone down and murmured to myself, time for them to drink their own promises. Baltimore's night was quiet. On the late news, the HarborPure logo appeared beside the words, Under State Investigation. I turned off the TV, poured a glass of water, and watched the light ripple through it. Clear, truly clear, the first time in years I drank without hesitation. Outside, the city slept, and for the first time I felt awake. My mother once told me, don't stir the water. But sometimes, only when the water rises do people finally see the bottom. 3 days after the state's investigation aired, I got an email invite. Executive session, 10 a.m. No agenda, no host, just a room number. 14th floor, where fluorescent lights always made people look paler than the truth. 4 of them sat around the table, Graham, Avery, Caleb, and someone from legal. No one spoke when I walked in. The hum of the AC and the scratch of pens filled the thick air. Graham started with a pressed-on smile. Sloane, first of all, we want to acknowledge your years of contribution. We'd like to make things right. I didn't react. Make things right usually shows up when people fear losing face more than losing ethics. He slid the first document across the table. Proposal 1, Director of Compliance. 15% raise. Immediate effect. You'll oversee all reporting processes with MDE. I glanced at the numbers and set them down. I have my own plans. Caleb blinked. Avery tightened her grip on her pen. Graham paused, then slowed his tone. We can be flexible. A second sheet was pushed forward. Avery read it out, voice tired. Director of Compliance and Public Health, 30% raise, independent budget, direct report to the CEO. I stacked the 2 pages together, the inked lines misaligned like 2 layers of mismatched water. 6 years was long enough to pick the right person, I said. If you really meant it, you'd have done it in year 2. Graham shifted in his chair, the metal squeaking like an old pipe exhaling. Fine, he said. Then here's the final offer. The third document landed in front of me. Thicker, fresh ink. Director, company shares, stock options, promotion path to VP. Caleb looked up, waiting for a nod. Graham stared straight at me. Your name holds the stock steady. The room went silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. I set the pen down, didn't sign. This wasn't a setback. It was an opportunity. Each word fell like a pebble into water, quiet, but exact. The legal officer leaned forward, voice as dry as a contract. However, there's still your non-compete clause. If you join any third-party firm within the region, you could. I opened my laptop, scrolling to the email titled Non-Compete Applicability under Maryland Law, Not Applicable, signed by HR, CC'd to Corporate Counsel. I turned the screen toward them. I asked before I resigned. Caleb let out a soft, "Oh." Avery blinked quickly, realizing the wall wasn't a wall at all, just glass. Graham tried to steady his tone. Sloane, we're offering what you always wanted. I used to think so, I said. But what I want now is for people to drink water without having to pray first. Caleb jumped in. If you stay, we can launch a new transparency campaign. Open data dashboards, public forums, press coverage. We need a trustworthy face. I'm not a face, I said. I'm a signature. Graham nodded slightly, something close to sincerity surfacing for once. If we agree to every transparency measure you proposed, then the first condition, I cut in, is that everyone who falsified data steps down, and every number that was rounded up gets reissued, along with a written apology to every neighborhood affected. He frowned. That would crash the stock. I don't manage stock, I said. I manage water. Legal clasped their hands, trying to reclaim authority through posture. And the documents you still hold, I wrote them. The originals are with MDE. What I keep is how I work. You don't own integrity. Graham leaned back, eyes tracing the ceiling. Sloane, be realistic. Out there, you'll be on your own. I smiled faintly. I've been on my own for 6 years already. Through the glass wall, I saw Avery standing outside, not entering. Her face was pale, not from guilt, but from recognition. She'd finally seen what fear looks like when it realizes it's been complicit. I turned back to the table. These offers are good for people chasing titles, not for those who guard the water. Caleb closed his laptop. Legal gathered their files. Graham looked up, weary. Then what do you want? Freedom. And accurate data. No chance you'll reconsider staying? I already did, I said, right before I signed the report to MDE. I stacked the proposals neatly, folded edge to edge like clean lab cloths, orderly, unused. Keep them. Give them to someone comfortable rounding numbers. Graham dropped his pen, watching me. I didn't think you'd go this far. I didn't think I'd stay this long. I stood, pushed the chair in, the sound of metal against tile sharp and final. Through the glass, Avery still stood frozen, phone in hand, like someone waiting for a signal to change direction. I nodded to her, not as an ally, not as an enemy, but as someone who'd finally seen where silence ends and guilt begins. I said my last line quietly, without weight or echo. I'm leaving the meeting. They're leaving their sanity. The door closed behind me. Rain tapped softly against the frame, steady and unhurried, like a reminder that once truth escapes your mouth, it never goes back. I walked down the bright hallway, mist rising around the windows. Behind me was power, ahead was air, and for the first time, I was breathing right. The new office was only half the size of HarborPure's old conference room, but its window opened to a full view of the Fells Point harbor. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the water, glimmering on the ceiling like a reminder that everything pure begins with transparency. On my desk sat a laptop, a cup of mint tea, and one empty chair by the window. The public's chair. I kept it there on purpose. No one was allowed to sit in it, but everyone who came could look out, where the water shifted gently between tide and sky. I called it the people's seat. Outside, the sign had gone up just yesterday. Tide line compliance, water integrity consulting. I wasn't used to hearing the word founder next to my name, but it made me smile. I didn't build a company. I built a principle and invited others who believed in it to work alongside me. Alicia was the first to walk through the door, a young woman with curls, a notebook full of formulas and questions. HarborPure once labeled her too idealistic for operations. Idealism is the root of every clean process, I told her. Without it, everything's just paperwork. She smiled, the kind of relief that comes when someone finally finds real water to swim in. Then came Ray, carrying a case of glass samples, 30 years in the lab, nearing retirement. I'm no good with computers, he said, but I know when a water sample's been diluted. I need someone who knows exactly that, I replied. The last to arrive was Mara Diaz, an independent attorney authorized to oversee data transparency. She didn't work for me or for the clients. She worked for the truth. This company doesn't do NDAs, I said. We have an integrity clause instead. You sign, I sign, and the public signs by watching. Mara nodded. That's the first contract I've seen that makes people look in the mirror. Our first project was the Transparency Dashboard, a real-time display of clean water data. Ray handled sample testing. Alicia built the sensor network. Mara audited every access log. I coordinated, but this time, I didn't do anyone else's job. When I saw them debating, I stayed quiet. listening, feeling like someone standing at the water's edge who no longer needs to dive in just to prove she can swim. The first week, there were only 4 of us. By week 4, 2 cities had reached out, wanting independent monitoring. Word spread quickly, not because of marketing, but because of trust, the one thing HarborPure had once dismissed as non-revenue generating. One Friday afternoon, Alicia stopped by my desk with a paper coffee cup. "Why did you name it Tideline?" she asked. "The tide line marks where the water reaches its limit," I said. "Every time the tide goes out, it leaves a boundary, a reminder that no matter how high the waves rise, there's a line the truth should never cross." She nodded slowly. "And if someone erases that line, I'll draw it again, clearer." Another evening, I sat with Ray reviewing the first batch of sensor data. All readings showed blue, stable water, safe levels. He looked at the screen and said softly, "I used to think these numbers were just formalities. Now I look at them and feel peace." I nodded, because for the first time, we're not rounding up. We laughed, then fell quiet, listening to the steady rhythm of waves below the pier. That night, I got home late. Ellie was painting at the kitchen table, watercolor rings spreading in soft blues. "Mom," she said, "I made this for you." The picture showed a lake with a crooked line of text beneath it. "Water stays clear when no one stirs the mud." I smiled. "Who taught you that?" "No one," she said. "I just see you do it every day." I laughed. Maybe for the first time, my daughter wasn't afraid of water anymore. One morning, Mom called. Her voice was slow but stronger now. "Sweetheart, is the water still clear?" "It is now, Mom." "Thank God," she said. "I don't have to mix bottled water in my tea anymore." I could hear the sound of running water on her end, ordinary, but to me, it was music made of peace. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed. The sunset hit the empty chair by the window, spilling a beam of light across the floor. I rested my hand on the chair, the one meant for the public, for those who were never told the truth, and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." From the window, I watched a small boat leave the dock, cutting a clean line across the harbor, smooth, narrow, and clear. I realized that for 6 years, I'd tried to keep everything moving. Now, I only needed to keep the water still. A message from Alicia popped up in the group chat. "Dashboard is live. Anyone who opens the site can see the city's clean water data." I clicked the link. A white page appeared with one small line in the corner. "Verified by Tideline Compliance." Below it, the levels for lead, chlorine, and PFAS glowed in blue. No rounding, no cover-ups. I stared at the screen. No press conference, no headlines. Transparency shines on its own when no one tries to flip the switch. That night, I reopened my old work journal. The last line I'd written before leaving HarborPure was, "I don't keep secrets, I keep evidence." Today, I added one more line. "Evidence doesn't need locks, only eyes that dare to look." I closed the notebook and poured a cup of tea. Steam rose, clear and still, reflecting the city's soft gold light outside the window. For the first time in years, I felt I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Now I work less, impact more, and sleep more deeply. I didn't expect the call from Graham, but it came exactly 7 o'clock a.m. on a Monday, 3 years after I left HarborPure. His voice was still low, only missing the breath of power it once carried. "Sloane," he said, "I'd like to meet. We could talk about collaboration." I paused. "Are you trying to collaborate or to make amends?" "Maybe both." 2 days later, I walked into the old building. The HarborPure logo had been replaced by H2 Renew Alliance, a new name for an old company trying to rinse off its history with branding. Inside, it still smelled of damp paper, rushed coffee, and that familiar tension wrapped in politeness. Conference room 14 hadn't changed. Only the table was longer, the blinds tighter. Graham stood when I entered, smiling the way people do when they've lost but still want to pretend they're leading the game. "Sloane, thank you for coming. I truly want to put the past behind us." You say that like the past is something you can box up and store away, I replied, setting my bag down. He poured water, his hand trembling, just enough for the first drop to spill over the rim. I want to propose something, he said. H2 Renew is restructuring. We'd like to merge with Tideline Compliance. The central lab would carry your name, Carter Analytical Suite. I looked up. A lab with my name on it? And a co-director role, full technical authority. And what about the right to publish data? He hesitated. Through internal communications protocol. I smiled. Which means the same old filter. I reached into my bag and took out the orange hard drive, the one that had followed me since the day I backed up everything. I placed it between us on the table. This isn't a threat, I said, just a reminder of why I left. The overhead light caught the plastic shell, glowing bright orange against the gray room. Graham stared at it as if seeing his reflection. You kept it? I keep every signed document, even the signatures that shouldn't exist. He swallowed, tried to smile. Sloane, I don't want to fight. I want to do what's right. Then do it. But if you came back, we could. You don't need me to do right, I cut in. You just need to stop doing wrong. Caleb entered then. Same wrinkled shirt, same too bright smile for a room this tense. Sloane, seriously, a lab named after you would make investors flood in. PR gold. I don't do PR, Caleb. Think of it as redemption. For both sides. No redemption needed, I said. Just stop repeating. Graham sighed, sitting down. We'll sign whatever terms you ask. No, I said. You'll sign one. I slid a page across the table, already prepared. The header read, Absolute Transparency Clause. Public health priority first. I don't want shares. I don't want my name on the wall. I want a binding commitment that every test, result, every exceedance, no matter how small, must be made public within 48 hours. No PR review. No internal clearance. No you. Graham stayed silent, his hand still on the glass. The light reflected off his skin, trembling like someone holding something they no longer had the right to keep. You realize that could crash the stock? Drop it, I said. Stocks know how to swim. People don't. Caleb cleared his throat. At least let us present this to the board first. No, I said. If you need a board's permission to tell the truth, you're not ready for clean water. The room went still. Outside the window, the Baltimore sky had faded, streaked with clouds the color of ash. Graham lowered his head, voice quieter. Sloane, you may think I don't deserve it, but I really do want to fix this. I looked at the orange hard drive. The light hit it again, glowing like an old flame that refused to die out completely. You don't need to apologize, I said. But if you won't sign absolute transparency and public safety priority, then don't sign anything at all. Graham sat motionless for a few seconds, then slowly pulled out his pen. His handwriting shook, but it was firm. When he set the pen down, sweat glistened on his forehead. Not from fear of me, but from finally understanding the weight of a signature. I picked up the document, said nothing. Transparency doesn't need gratitude, only execution. Caleb exhaled, half laughing, half serious. At least she didn't ask for extra slides. I smiled faintly. I stopped needing slides a long time ago. As I stood, Graham looked up. Do you still believe I can change? I believe water can filter, I said, but sometimes all that's left is residue. I slipped the orange drive back into my bag. Outside, a light rain began to fall, streaking the glass with lines the color of diluted ash. At the door, I turned back. Some bridges once burned stay ash. No one answered. I walked down the hall, my footsteps steady, deliberate. Behind me, their voices started again, low, hurried, like people trying to count the pieces of a shattered mirror. Outside, I took a deep breath. The air was damp, laced with salt from the harbor. Above, a break of light split through the clouds. I walked slowly, letting the wind hit my face. No metallic taste, no threat in the air. That evening, I returned to the Tideline office. The lights glowed softly, reflecting over the still water outside the window. The empty chair by the glass remained where it always was. Quiet, patient, a promise kept. I placed the orange drive on my desk. Not as evidence anymore, but as a keepsake. Some bridges burn and turn to ash. But sometimes ash is the only proof that you walked the right way. Saturday morning. The Tideline office was still as windless water. The window was cracked open, early harbor air drifting in from Fells Point, carrying the scent of salt and the faint clink of anchor chains. I set my freshly brewed coffee on the desk. Clear, smooth, reflecting light like a small mirror. A perfect cup. No cloudiness, no metallic aftertaste like the morning I was denied for the 10th time. The empty chair by the window was still there. On the desk, the orange hard drive rested beside the laptop, silent, like a witness who had finished its testimony. I opened my inbox. Between reports and dashboards, one subject line made me stop. Thank you, from a stranger. The email was short, unsigned. My son drinks tap water again. Thank you for doing what others should have done. I read it slowly, each word soaking in. A tear dropped onto the desk, not from sadness, but because, for the first time, my silence had created a sound that carried. The window stayed open. Light spread across the glass, pale as silver ash. I opened the transparency dashboard. All readings were green. Lead level in Canton 0.004 megauge L. No exceedance. I didn't need a press conference. I just needed numbers that told the truth. A new email pinged. Sender, Avery Lang. Subject, I'm sorry. I hesitated a moment before opening it. Sloane, I saw your name in the latest MDE report. I guess you're still doing what's right. It took me nearly 2 years to understand what was wrong. I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. I'm applying to join the Water Integrity Task Force. If they ask, could you confirm that I did the right thing at least once? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to do it right this time. I looked at the screen and smiled, then typed slowly. Avery. Transparency first, redemption later. When you truly choose what's right, the door never closes. I hit send. No satisfaction, no bitterness, just lightness, like water rinsing dust away. Leaning back, I looked out the bright window. Sunlight spread across the wall, glinting on the orange hard drive. Its plastic shell faded, worn smooth by years. I brushed a hand over it. They thought removing me was the solution, I said softly. But sometimes removing residue is what makes the water clear. The wall clock ticked once. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line for this year's project. Transparency is not a slogan, it's maintenance. I looked up. Alicia arrived early, holding a box of donuts. Hey, the city just sent an invite, she said. They want you to speak at Environmental Integrity Week. Something about a restoration story. I laughed. They'll be disappointed. I don't tell stories of recovery. I tell stories of doing it right, even if late. Alicia smiled. That is recovery, Sloane. I turned on the recorder, a habit since the day I started narrating Silent Justice each week. My voice came steady, low, deliberate. This wasn't a setback. It was an opportunity. I paused, took a breath. Some bridges once burned stay ash. I looked at my coffee, light shimmering in the surface with each small gust of wind. Ash and light, two opposites now blending into one calm reflection. I kept recording, voice deep and warm. If you've ever been told you're not ready, comment me and tell me where you're listening from. Chicago, Dallas, or maybe beside a faucet you still believe is safe. 97% of you still haven't subscribed. Do it. I share Silent Justice every week. Stories of those who don't shout, don't slam doors, don't seek revenge. They just do what's right. And they win quietly. I turned off the mic and sat still. The only sound left was the gentle slap of waves against the pier. Sunlight stretched across the desk, touching the empty chair by the window. I looked down at my coffee, so clear I could see my reflection fading in the mirror of water. If there were a camera, it would pan slowly toward the window. Outside, the light would shimmer across the harbor, bouncing back into the room. No music, just wind, and the distant hum of the docks. In the final frame, the orange hard drive sat beside the clear coffee cup, light spilling across the wall like the last gold trace of day. Everything is quiet except for the echo that lingered. This wasn't a setback, it was an opportunity. And far away, where water met sky, a streak of silver light stretched across the horizon, as if to answer, "When the water is clear enough, even ash knows how to reflect the sun."